that I've got your attention, let's talk about Fairy Tail. What's going on, everybody? I am Dom from Switchden, and today we're going to be talking about Fairy Tail, the game on the Nintendo Switch. Yes, as you can see, Fairy Tail is filled with a bunch of fan service, but the game is much more than that. I wanted to start today talking about the review with a lot of misconception that I've heard out there. And the biggest thing, if you have heard a ton of other reviews, and if you've landed on this one, the chances are you have heard a bunch of other reviews. The first thing I want to touch on is, can you play the Fairy Tail game if you have not seen the anime? And I wanted to answer this because a lot of reviews out there are basically saying that yes, you can. And yes, that is true. The reality is you can play any game without knowing backstory if it has a lot of pre-existing lore and things like that. But when it comes to a specific anime game, a lot of times they basically immerse you into the world with a side story or something of that nature, to where you really don't need to know anything that goes on with the actual anime, because the way the games actually are built are to introduce you to the characters, to the world, and what it is about. Well, with Fairy Tail, the way it is done is a lot different than that I have just described. The way Fairy Tail is it actually plops you in right in the middle of the story. So if you don't have any pre-existing knowledge of Fairy Tail and have watched the anime before, I unfortunately have to tell you that this is probably not the game for you. I myself actually ended up watching around 175 episodes before I even jumped into the game. Reason being is I jumped into the game and I immediately had nothing and no emotional ties. I had no knowledge of the game whatsoever, and the game literally starts right in the middle of the show. So I quickly hit the pause button and I went to start and watch the anime, and yes, I did get addicted. The anime is fantastic. You should probably watch it if you enjoy anime. And after around, I think on episode 151 is when I said, okay, now I can actually start playing the game. And thankfully, I thought that was probably the best course of action and best way to go about playing the game. So I just have to tell you that from the beginning, that if you haven't watched the anime, you should probably skip this game, especially because it is a $60 game. It's a full price game, and if you don't have pre-existing love for this franchise, then honestly, this is probably just not the game for you, and that's okay. Now, I'm going to continue with the review, and I'm going to tell you all pieces of the game, and if it's something that you still decide you want to play, then just know that you should probably watch the anime alongside playing the game, or you should definitely go back and watch the anime just because of how this game is done. Now, with that being said, let's get into the official review. Also, I'm Dom. Again, I'm from Switchden. Make sure you guys hit subscribe. Make sure you guys hit like. It'll definitely help us out. We're going to be growing here on the channel a lot, and we would love if you are on the adventure with us and you join our guild over here on the Switchden. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's start talking about the story. So again, like I said the last couple minutes, is the story of the game drops you right in the middle between Season 4, 5, 6, and 7. And I know that sounds kind of broad, but the reality is the way this game is structured, it goes and blows through a lot of the story really fast. When the game first started, it introduces you to a character named Hades, and you're right in the middle of a serious arc that has to do with Tenro Island. Now, Tenro Island is an island that the Fairy Tail Guild actually houses, or they have. It's basically their island, to where the spirit of all the Fairy Tail Guild is in one spot, along with the first guild master. It throws you right into the middle of that story right before a major plot and major time jump happen inside of the game. Now, this time jump that ends up happening is you basically flash forward into 7 years, and then that's when the game actually really begins. But when you start it off, you're not going to know much about who the characters are, who you're fighting, especially if you've only watched maybe a season, a few episodes, or something of that nature. Again, this is right in the middle towards the end of season number 4, so it's about 80-ish, 70-ish episodes into the actual anime. So again, you're not going to know who a lot of these people are, and that's okay, but just know that's exactly where it's going to start you, is you're going to go and you're going to have a really huge battle, and yes, the Fairy Tail Guild is going to pull through, and they are going to win. Now, again, the winning is kind of, you can look at it kind of glass half full kind of thing, because yes, they kind of win, but at the same time they lose because they get stuck in like a extra dimensional world, quote unquote, let's say sleeping for about 7 years, and when they wake they find out that the world has drastically changed. They head back to the guild to where they used to be number 1, and they are actually the most dead last guild in the entire land of Fiore, which is Earthland, which is where they live. You're gonna find out that you're the last guild, and that's really when the game begins. The game is gonna ask you to do a lot, and they're gonna ask you to basically take the guild from dead last back to number 1, where they used to be a long time ago, and that is what you're going to be tasked to do. You're going to be tasked to do it with doing a ton of different requests through the request board. You're going to be doing it through specific character building arcs alongside, as you are introduced to every single Fairy Tail member, and you get to play around 16 different Fairy Tail members, so you're going to have a lot of story and a lot of lore that is going to be really awesome for you. And again, if you're a Fairy Tail fan, you are just going to eat it up. Now, the one downside of the story is it sticks extremely closely to the anime and the manga, and the anime specifically, and that's where my first kind of point of contention and my first kind of disappointment begins. A lot of games out there like Sword Art Online and other games of that nature, especially Bandai, because Bandai basically does most of like the One Pieces and the Sword Arts and every other anime style game, One Punch Man, etc, etc. And a lot of the really good anime games, what they do is they say, hey, we know you love these characters, here's a side story that doesn't have anything to do with the anime, but it could be tied into the anime, and that's the best. This game does it different, to where it sticks extremely closely to the anime, so much so if you know everything that happens in the anime, nothing here is a surprise. Actually, you're gonna be kind of disappointed because some of the big plot points and big fights and big battles that happen in the anime are completely blown over here, and they're cut out, and they just kind of skip over to the next story beat, so you don't even get to really enjoy some of the really cool fights that happen, especially later on in the game, about halfway through, when you are doing the championship, when you are doing the tournament. You're gonna find that a lot of the really cool battles that happen there, you don't get to be a part of, but I digress. Now, that's my first point of contention with the game, is the story. It sticks too close to the actual story of the anime, and I really wish that it didn't. I wish that they took some liberties and took some risks and really went outside of the actual main story of the game. Although I do love re-experiencing it, because I did just watch the anime, it's still so fresh in my mind. I feel like I'm just doing it over again, and there were times I started looking down at my phone, and as a gamer, and I'm sure you know, the moment you start looking at your phone, that means you are starting to care a lot less about what's going on. The next thing is gameplay. So let's talk about the gameplay. So I think that's really the hero of what Fairy Tail brings to the table. I think the gameplay in this game is fantastic. Now, the moment-to-moment stuff, again, you're doing requests, taking requests, talking to people alongside in the world as you free roam, things of that nature. But when you're actually in battle, I think the battle system is completely fantastic. They have like this like semi kind of turn-based battle system in the game, to where it's kind of like a grid style, kind of like what Fire Emblem looks like, but it's not so intrinsic to where it's just turn-based. You pick your move, you pick your magic, you pick your spell, and it's able to actually pick the different tiles of which your enemies are on. And when you pick a spell, you're gonna have a tile that says, okay, this is the tile that most of all your magic's gonna go into. Here's your second, here's your third, here's your multiple tiles, and here's how the magic's gonna spread out. So if you have large enemies that you're facing, which you'll face a lot, you're able to really balance this with how you're gonna choose your moves. Even further than that, of course, the Fairy Tail Guild is all about friends and family. You're able to really complement all of the people in your party, whether you're choosing Natsu, Urza, Gray, and Lucy, or whether you're choosing, you know, Windy, Gray, Godjill, whatever characters that you're choosing, you're going to be able to completely complement each other. And again, that's where some of the knowledge of having the pre-existing knowledge of the anime comes in hand, knowing what characters really are going to be working well together. You're going to know that when you lock in Gray and Juvia, that they are going to have unison raids. When you have Lucy and Natsu, which are the main characters of the game, you're going to be able to have their unison raids. Urza's going to work really well with Natsu and Gray. You just kind of this pre-existing stuff that you're going to have. And the gameplay, though, is really the hero stuff, because again, like I said, you do have unison raids that you can do, you have your ultimates that you can do, and it's very, very, very pleasing, and it's very cool to be able to do this. I think the gameplay of the game is where the game shines the most. I love battling, although a lot of them are extremely repetitive. I think battling is part of the best thing of the game. Now let's talk about graphics and performance. Like I said, we are playing this game on the Nintendo Switch, so the graphics of the game aren't on par exactly where the PlayStation 4 is. Now, it is not as bad. It plays in about a 720p when you're playing it on your big screen, and it has like some dynamic resolution when you're playing it in handheld. Now, my biggest part isn't the way that it looks. I think it's a beautiful and artistically well done game. My problem is on the latter of the two things we're covering, and that is the performance. I think the performance on this game is really, really bad, especially on the Nintendo Switch. If you play it on the PlayStation 4, you're going to have a much better experience, but if you play it on the Nintendo Switch, it is a 30 frame game, and for some reason, it's sub 30 frames a lot of the time. You're going to be finding yourself in the land of Magnolia or in Coruscant or whatever specific towns that are in the game. You're going to find yourself that you're in the towns, and the towns run horribly. They run at sub 20 frames, and it is jarring, and it gave me a headache big time. Now, they did update the game, and it runs a teeny bit better than when I started playing it about a couple weeks ago, but the frame rate is just completely jarring, and it is terrible. And the hiccups that happen, especially in large battles, happen all the time, and it can really take you out of the experience, and it can really just make you blink very hard because it's just very jarring. Now, I did find playing in handheld is a little bit better. I feel because of the lower resolution and the demands of the Switch, it actually runs a lot better. So in my honest opinion to you is, if you can, and if you don't mind playing handheld, that should be the way that you play the game. I played it in docked most of the time because I was capturing a lot of the footage just because I didn't know how much or how little footage I would actually need of the game. But if you can play handheld, that's going to be the way to go. The next thing is sound. Now, the sound design of this game is awesome. It's very much, again, rooted in the anime, and the sound and the music and the OS of the anime is fantastic. They have bangers that are going to just leave you just remembering them and bopping to them forever. And the game really summons the spirit of the anime. I think the sound is awesome in this game. I think the music is awesome. The battle music, it never gets old. My biggest problem with sound is not musically or sound effects. My biggest problem with the game is that you were only offered the Japanese voice actors here. And if you're like me, I watch the dubbed anime. And a lot of the people out there who are anime purists would be like, absolutely not. I'm sorry, but it's okay. A lot of us really enjoy listening to the dubbed version. And the fact that they're missing here begins my biggest struggle with a lot of games that are JRPGs and animes, is when they don't have the dubbed voiceovers, you miss a lot of the stuff that happens. When you're in battles, they shout things and they don't subtitle them, so you have no idea what they're saying to each other. When they're doing certain unison raids, they're going to be yelling their moves, and because they're not subbed in that moment, you don't know what they're saying. And that really sucks. I feel like because you're not part of the native language of Japanese, you miss a lot of the little things that you could really be enjoying in the game, and that's sad to see. Bandai Namco is a huge company, and they do this with their Sword Art series as well as a lot of other anime games. I just wish they would put that little extra touch and dub over the game. There are dubs out there like Persona that are done amazingly. There are other anime games that have come out in the past that are done amazingly, like Dragon Ball. And I think that when they don't do it in a game like this, that it just really hurts your fan base, especially with a lot of them in America are going to really love and be very tied into the dubbed. And when they hear the Japanese versions of them, if they've never listened to the subbed version of the anime, it's going to be very jarring, and it just sucks to see. Alright, here are my final thoughts on the games, guys. So, the game, I thought, as a Fairy Tail fan, is really awesome. I think it sticks way too close to the actual anime, and I wish that they diverge from this a little bit to give us a really interesting and cool story that we couldn't have gotten anywhere else. I wish that they didn't start the game right in the middle of the series itself, and that's why I wish that they gave us a side story to where anybody could jump in and play. This game demands your knowledge and your love of the characters. If you don't know what a lot of these characters are, even in some of the plot points, they reference characters, but they don't show them. So unless you know who they are, you have no idea who the heck that they're talking about. And that just sucks as somebody new coming into the game, especially when they're demanding a $60 price and they want you to pay for this game. They could have had a much wider audience because the game really does a lot of good things really well. I think the battle mechanics are awesome. I think the sound design's awesome. I wish that they had dubbed the game. And I think that if you're a Fairy Tail fan, I think this is a day one purchase. If you're not a Fairy Tail fan, I think you should watch the anime, and if you begin to like it, I think you jump into the game. And if you're not interested in the game or the anime, I think this is just not for you at all. If you haven't watched the anime, I don't think you should play this game. You're not going to have the same ties to it, and I really don't think you waste your $60 on it. Maybe one day when it goes down to 10, 20, 15 bucks, 20 bucks, I think maybe you jump in for fun for a few hours, but I really think that this demands your knowledge of Fairy Tail. Guys, with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and give this game a switchden score of 7 out of 10. Guys, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you guys like, make sure you guys subscribe, make sure you become a friend, and join the switchden. And we'll catch you guys on the next video. Peace.